Hello, everyone, and welcome to the best and worst of Walt Disney World, brought to you by Dreams Unlimited Travel, as well as DizBoards.com. I am your host, Ryan O'Clavin, and in this week's episode, we're going to be discussing Corey Fiasconaro's top 5 worst Walt Disney World attractions. And to have this discussion with me, obviously, we've got Mr. Corey Fiasconaro.
Hey, guys.
Mr. Steve Porter.
Hello.
And Mr. Craig Williams.
Ahoy, ahoy.
So, we did an episode where it was your best. Now it's time to lay on the worst. And you had an interesting best attractions choices. Nothing like too curveball-y in here, but
Yep.
I'm curious to see what your worst are. So why don't you just dive in and give us your number 5 worst, working up to what is your least favorite, okay?
And again, I need to, like I mentioned in my best, I need to say something before I start. I actually wasn't so much worried about reading my best choices. I was more worried about reading my worst choices. And there are attractions that have come up in the past, few years or so, the past like 5-6 years, that I just have never, ever gone on because it's just not something that appeals to me in this day and age. So I can't rate those on my worst because I've never brought myself to go on them. Also, with that being said, some of the choices I have on my worst list right now, younger me would have had them as his favorite rides of all time. So it's just, I don't feel good after getting off of the same rides that I loved when I was younger. And that's where I'm going to go into my number 5. And I'm waiting to hear what you guys think about it. I'm sorry. I love this ride. I love the idea of this ride, and I wish I could do it. But I try often to do this ride. Very often, I say, okay, I have nothing to do tomorrow. Let's try and hit this up before I leave the park. And it never turns out good. I always end up having a bad day. My number 5 is Star Tours.
Really? Okay. Is it I can get it. I can get it. Motion simulator.
Yep.
Yeah.
So basically, it's like, okay, there's all these different experiences I can have on here that I haven't done nearly close to any of them. Like, I've probably seen about 5 different experiences. And every time I'm like, okay, last time was awful. I got a throbbing headache and started throwing up. Sorry if that's TMI, but it's what happens to me when I do things like this. And maybe if I go on this time, this experience will be less harsh on me, and I can have a lot of fun. And I go on, and it's never fun for me. But I love Star Tours as a kid. When I first brought Haley here for the first time, I was really excited to go back on there. And it's just, I've come to learn that it's not something that I can do. So that's how it ended up on this list.
Okay, I could see that. I'm not going to judge you for that.
Okay, well,
Yeah.
I'm surprised.
Yeah.
Because I thought you guys would be up in arms about that one.
It's not. I think it's because it's. I don't know about all of us in the room right here, but I think at least for like Steve and I, it's probably an attraction that would fall kind of just middle of the pack, where it's not the best thing ever, it's not the worst thing ever. It's just kind of right in the middle. Like, I think Rhino, even though he loves Star Wars,
yeah,
and he loves, I've been with him on Star Tours, especially after like the last update when they added in the Last Jedi scenes on Crate, to have the full experience of going Force Awakens, add BB-8, and then end off with Crate in The Last Jedi. That was such a cool sequence to have. That being said, he also gets sick very easily at stuff, so it's like, okay, I'll do that once and never again.
Yep.
So I think it's. I don't know if this is on anyone's best list. Probably the old version, the original version, I would probably put that on my best, some of the best rides of all time. But this one,
Yeah, and I think that this is a good example of like why these lists are our lists and not like everyone's favorites or everyone's least favorites or whatever. Because obviously, if you get sick, you're not gonna like it. So makes sense.
Cool.
Yeah. What do you got for number 4?
All right, so number 4, specifically, if you asked me when I was 12, this would have been my number 1 attraction, my number 1 favorite attraction. And I actually have a really cool memory connecting this attraction back to my earlier trips. It's one of my most fond memories of Disney as a kid. But as of now, not so much. And that's our version of Space Mountain. Now, Disneyland's version of Space Mountain, that's a different story. That's basically a different ride. Our version here in World, however, is very janky it feels. Like it's like it moves like very jerky, and I walk off and my joints hurt, my head hurts. I don't necessarily feel nauseous, but if you get my head to hurt, eventually I probably will become nauseous. And I'm just unable to...
You sound like Filbert from Rocko's Modern Life a little bit, where you're like, oh, I'm nauseous. I'm nauseous.
I remember that show. But yeah, it's...
I feel that pain. Like it to me feels like when I go to Disneyland, on the contrary to ride Matterhorn, and sometimes it twists just right. I feel like one of my spinal, it's going to twist my spine just right. And so like the older I'm getting, the more... Like, I love Space Mountain, but the fear I have on it is not like, oh, this is fun fear. It's like, no, this is where I'm going to die. So I can understand your dislike of it.
I love Space Mountain, but I also, if it is painful to you, I understand. I've ridden it enough times now that I can kind of anticipate the turns, so they don't really hurt me that much, but I don't know.
Yeah, I like Rhino just mentioned, Matterhorn at Disneyland, same style. It pains me to go on it. That doesn't change the fact that it's one of my favorite rides out there. Space Mountain, I think, isn't as bad as a lot of people make it out to be. It's a very strange attraction in that even though there's only 6 seats in a row, it is a very different ride depending on which one of those seats you're in. And if you're in, like, I feel like seat 4 is sometimes the worst. That's the one. And usually...
I feel like that's the one I get stuck in.
Yeah. But usually if you're sitting in the middle of an attraction, that's kind of usually... that's the most all-around experience, where I feel in the back... it's actually, over time, it's gotten to be less intense. Sitting in forward, I think, is the best seat you could sit in. The front seat, I think that's the most relaxing seat you can sit in on that ride. I feel like you're almost like a bobsled driver. You're anticipating those turns. You're leaning into them. So it's...
You're seeing the face of John Candy.
Yes, John Candy speaking in your ear from the dead. But overall, I don't respect that it's on your list, but I respect you.
I don't think that's true either. All right, what's your number 3?
Well, it's a good thing. Those were the ones I was most worried about. It were over the controversial hurdle, I hope.
Well, that's everyone in the room. The internet, you're a slave to the internet, so I hate to tell you that. But go ahead.
That's still yet to happen yet. But my number 3, which I think would be on a lot of people's lists, is... And I do love Tomorrowland, by the way. I do love Tomorrowland. I love how just the land itself. But Tomorrowland Speedway, it smells like pure pollution. The line is usually the line is never really like a walk on at all. Usually it warrants like 30 to 40 minute waits. Any amount of wait shorter than walk on, though, because I've ridden this ride or this experience many a times. Any wait short of a walk-on feels very disappointing, too. Like, I've had a lot of times on vacations where I'm like, oh, let's go do the Tomorrowland Speedway. It's been a while. And, like, maybe we fast pass it or something, but I never walk off and I'm like, I'm really glad I did that. I always walk off and I'm like, I sat in a car that smelled awful and drove...
Don't you always feel like your legs are never where they're supposed to be, too? Like, I always feel like I'm, tippy-toeing, trying to push the thing down, I'm like, how do children do this?
Yeah, yeah.
I also think
that's why they have to be a certain height in order to drive.
It's actually the highest height requirement if you're not with someone that's a certain
height. Is it really?
Yep.
Also, I think it's the number 1 contributor to the hole in the ozone layer over the state of Florida, too.
It's not that bad. I just wrote it yesterday. It's not that bad. It really isn't. I think it's like one of those things a lot of people blow out of proportion. Like, I'm sure if you worked there every day of your life for 10 years, you might be a little upset. It's not that bad. I think the smoking section that used to be right behind it was terrible. A lot worse.
I also think that the problem with this ride is with the Tron expansion coming soon, they're having to shorten this ride more and more. Mm-hmm. And I just think what already wasn't a lot of people's favorite attraction has now been shortened.
Oh, and it feels incredibly short.
That's what I was going to ask.
Yeah,
you.
No, it feels incredibly short. If you're a kid, I'm sure it's still a great experience, but as an adult, it felt underwhelming.
Yeah.
I'll just
Yeah,
put that.
and then at that point, then why not? I just don't understand why they didn't just say this thing has seen its course, and I don't know.
Think about the kids.
Yeah,
Think about the kids.
Well, they could have replaced it with something else. That was a lot of land.
we were talking, I think last week about Canopy Lake Park.
Yeah.
And Canopy Lake Park has like a driving ride where like you drive like an old school car.
Yeah.
That's cool. That.
Oh yeah, I'm
that
familiar.
attraction
I
at
remember that
Canopy
one.
Lake.
But you
that's-
sit up on like a bench, so it's easier because you're like higher up. But,
Yeah, so like I'd expect like Canopy Lake Park is kind of like a much more low budget park than Disney. I'd expect, and that I feel like that attraction at Canopy Lake Park is better done than Tomorrowland Speedway. So that's kind of what I compare it to. So I feel like if Canopy Lake, and sorry for people who are watching, I have no idea what I'm talking about.
It's also funny because you keep calling it Canopy Lake, but it's Canopy Lake. It's a B, not a P.
Yeah,
So you're
well-
calling it like the canopy in the trees. So it's funny to me, like that you're.
we pronounce things wrong.
Yeah. Well, what's your number 2?
So my number 2 is the Teacups, Mad Tea Party. I love Alice. I love the movie. I love the aesthetic of Alice, but I don't like teacups, which you can probably assume at this point why.
Teacups are garbage.
There's a lot of rides that involve like the entire premise of the ride is spinning that should be on here, but I can't put them on here because I've never done them. Like Steve, I believe your worst last week was the
Primeval Whirl.
Primeval Whirl, right. I've never done that. I've never felt the urge to do that, and I know I wouldn't like it, so I've never been on it. Teacups is something that I've been on multiple times and then finally realized into adulthood that this isn't something that appeals to me anymore, but spinning is the immediate way that I'm going to get a migraine. And like even on like the Seas with Nemo and Friends, it's a ride that I do often, and I do actually like that ride. I like that ride, but in the scene where you go through and there's the tunnel with the Crush and the turtles, I have to close my eyes.
Yeah.
I sit here like this and wait to be told when it's done because it's bad. But yeah, I can't do spinning, and I can't do like my visuals going in a motion of spinning is a bad day for me.
Yeah, for me, Alice is just not very. It's not a. I get that it is a classic attraction, classic Disney film, but it like I've seen teacup attractions. I hate to keep bringing it back to Canopy Lake Park, but they had a better version of the teacup attraction there that was a little more mad teacuppy because they would intersect with each other.
Sounds like you two need to start a
Like,
podcast
I know,
about this
right?
park I've never heard of.
If you're from New England, you've probably been there. But it's like it just like this one for me is you're just kind of all spinning on one plate in one area. So like I understand there are people who spinning doesn't do anything to them and they love that whole thing, and this is a classic attraction, so I get it. But I just like if they got rid of it, I'd be like, well, sorry.
See, I will understand why people wouldn't like it, but I have gone on this with so many people who say, I don't like spinning. And then once you put them on there with you and you wind that thing up and you get it going,
like
even the person who says, oh, I'm going to throw up, I guarantee you they will have the biggest smile on their face. By the time the ride stops, then they'll be dizzy and they won't be able to walk straight. But while they're in the moment, they enjoy every second of it. And
I do like
happened every single time I rode it with someone who complains about it.
See, I love watching the video you took of Teresa riding it because it makes me laugh.
And
that's how I'll ride it.
That was a situation. That was one of the references I was saying, is that it started off where she's like, okay, don't get too crazy, get very crazy. She was having the time of her life. Then when I slowed down, it was, but
All right, well, what's the number 1? Your least favorite attraction at Walt Disney World?
So again, if I had gone on it, it's probably Primeval Whirl, but I never have. But a ride that I have gone on one time, and I think I even went into the non-intense one, Mission Space. My brother and my mom are actually going to be here this weekend. I think I mentioned that on another show. I don't remember. Actually, by the time this goes up, that would have already happened. But my brother was adamant, being like, oh, let's fast pass Mission Space. And I was just like, you can.
Yeah.
I am not getting on that ride with you because, again, the theme here. My theme on best was I like relaxing water rides. My theme on worst is...
You don't like simulators.
Yeah, I don't like spinning at all. And, yeah, stuff like that.
Yeah, when you said earlier in the list said, I don't know if it was your 5 or 4 when you said Star Tours.
Yes.
I was like, oh, I know it's coming.
Yeah.
I mean, I think we've spoke about this on other shows before too. Is that it's not even necessarily the concept. The concept is a cool idea, and I do love the idea of a space-oriented attraction. And the building over there is beautiful, but I do wish it could maybe start over again with innovation, add a little bit more innovation, and add more stuff to it. I've only done it the one time. It was on the green side, and I was like,
I will say, if you are okay if you don't get motion sickness very easily, I think
and you're not claustrophobic,
then the G's forces that you're feeling do add to the immersiveness of the ride. So as long as you are okay with that, I understand why you don't love this ride, and I rarely go on this too for the same reason, because there's a 1 out of 5 chance that I'm going to get sick too. So I'm kind of with you a little bit on that too. But I think if you don't get motion sickness and don't mind that claustrophobia, I think the ingenuity of the ride is still pretty impressive.
Mm-hmm. All right, well, wrap it up for us. Take us back through the list real quick.
So my worst picks were number 5, Star Tours. Although I love Star Wars and I love Star Tours, I just can't do it. My number 4 was Space Mountain. Again, younger version of me would have been a big fan of that. Number 3, Tomorrowland Speedway. Number 2 was Mad Tea Party. And number 1, being my least favorite, would be Mission Space.
Well, there you have it. If you want to direct any hateful comments or energy toward Corey, his home address is no. But it's all. These are just his personal picks. So don't hate on it. If you want to relate to it or share with us your personal picks, you go ahead, leave that in the comments below. Tweet at us, any of that fun stuff. Thank you guys for having this conversation. Thank you everyone out there for listening and watching. That is going to do it for this episode. But we'll be back soon with another episode of the best and worst of Walt Disney World.